My name is Carmen Brown, and I'm going to be talking about a few bullet points related to patients with kidney disease. I am looking specifically at data in the state of Michigan from dates of 2017 through 2022, and I'm only talking about dialysis patients. There's a lot of information out there about all of this, and I work in the field specifically for nephrology, which is um, the specialty who cares for patients with kidney disease, whether it's full end stage renal, which is noted here, and we're talking about people who have no kidney function whatsoever. Um, uh, and we also take care of patients with chronic kidney disease, which is pre-end stage, meaning there's still some function of your kidneys, either one or both. Um, and you're not fully, in complete kidney failure, which is it demands, dialysis. So some background information very quickly. Kidney disease is a chronic disease. Typically, poor diet, um, absence of any health and wellness behaviors is what brings on kidney disease. Age, immune disorders, genetic disorders. In the U.S., people who have kidney disease and full kidney failure have access to certain things. Another thing to note is we're born with two. You can have one functioning kidney, but you can't have zero functioning kidneys. It's not survivable. Um, and it can be reversed if you catch it early enough. Maybe not fully reversed, but it can be improved. And I know people who actually have had success with that. So billions of dollars in the US go into taking care of patients with kidney disease. Um, Data from 2021 um, reported $52.3 billion for patients with kidney disease, end stage kidney disease, meaning complete renal failure. There's another number out there that's to the tune of $86 million, for $86 billion for patients with chronic kidney disease. So, okay, so in 2020, there was an act, or excuse me, 2010, the Affordable Care Act created a program called the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation. And in short, the funds that were allocated towards creating that department um, were meant to give certain committees, legislators, stakeholders at the federal level uh, dollars to develop programs to improve the life of a dialysis patient or a patient with chronic kidney disease. Again, we're only talking about dialysis patients right now. And encourage or incentivize providers who care for them to focus on things such as reducing hospital admissions, increasing home therapy options, looking more at preemptive transplants, and overall improving mortality rates. So we're going to look at three different things. I am specifically looking at has there been an increase in home dialysis in Michigan? And again, we're looking at dates from 2017 through 2022. And then is there an increase in transplantations? Meaning, is the community saying, hey, you need to sign up for transplant and go meet with this transplant program and see if you qualify for a kidney transplant? And then the other thing I want to look at is what kind of trends exist within the cause of death, specifically because I'm intrigued by what COVID did in the middle of developing all of these programs. So let's take a peek at the data. All right, so this is just a general graph that displays the volume of dialysis patients geographically in the state of Michigan, and it's kind of a heat map. So essentially here in the Southeast Michigan area, you can see that the number of dialysis patients is quite high. But to kind of look at from 2017 to 2022, I did just a simple line graph I provided here. So you can see there were 15,000 507 and then in 2017, and then the decline over time, you can see that in 2022 there were 14,538 recorded dialysis patients in the state of Michigan. And if I just select this we're going to remove some of the bottom pieces here. So this is looking at chains. So chains are the dialysis providers. So you have DaVita, you have Fresenius, you have this Dialysis Care Inc., which can't fully see here, Greenfield, some independents, and so forth and so on. So our largest provider overall from 2017 to 2022 has been DaVita. Next in line has been Fresenius Medical Care. So if I select a specific year here, I can look at their population for that specific year. So again, in the year 2020, we had 15,000. 2022, we dropped down to 14. So let's look and see here. So we can see Fresenius still number 2 in the Michigan market. They had 5,655 patients, and then here DaVita had 5,961 patients. So if I'll move on to the next slide, because that's just kind of a general population bit for us. So here we're talking about the different modalities we want to look at. Was there a change or an increase in home dialysis utilization, or home modalities, as they call it in the industry, from 2017 to 2022, when those funds were really showing up in the community? And as you can see, there are 3 different modality options. So CAPD, CCPD, and HHD. And that's broken down to show you here what that means. Peritoneal dialysis is our top 2. One is ambulatory, the other is a continuous cycling. And then the other here is home hemodialysis. Home hemodialysis is interesting because there's a lot of new technology, not just funding from the government, but there's a lot of new equipment available on the market to dialysis providers to acquire. And in recent years, there's been kind of a jump in the number of patients opting to utilize these machines, as well as providers certified to utilize them. So you can see here, there's been a decrease in the CAPD option, and the other 2 have increased when you're looking at the numbers. Overall, there's been a growth in home modality. And if we take a peek here, you can just kind of see in our tree map how tree map here how this is kind of broken down. That one doesn't give us the greatest depiction, but here we've got our CCPD, which has been the most popular option selected among dialysis patients. And then down below, we've got the companies, the top 3 companies, which were previously noted on the slide. So we just kind of looked at that previous slide. There's a lot. These are our main providers in the Michigan market, with DaVita leading. DaVita, what's interesting here, has been the top supplier or provider utilizing this HHD method when you're looking at the others. So that's a good thing that home dialysis is increasing. And the reason why that's a good thing in the field, we're happy about that because our patients aren't missing treatments. Now we want to look at transplant as another modality here. So I'm going to look at transplant, and I can see these are eligible patients from 2017 through 2022. 2017 is at the top, 2022 down here. And what you can see here is that the number of eligible patients decreased. Well, the number of patients overall also decreased, so that makes sense. When we look at the number of transplants completed, though, there is a significant gap between eligible patients and transplants completed, and that has always been the case. And that system is broken in the United States of America. And you can go out to Google and look some of that stuff up, but essentially there are problems with the transplant system in the U.S. And there's a lot of information out on the web, and I hate to say it, but unfortunately it is broken, and it is true, and it is something that the government is aware of and is trying to fix. And they've been putting, dollars, albeit slow, into the program, trying to figure out what are we going to do to get these numbers up. The average, as you can see, over the 5 years in Michigan was only 439 patients. 2020 had a huge decrease. Of course it would, because of COVID. When COVID happened, those types of procedures decreased because people didn't want to go into the hospital, and a lot of other things. But when we look at this over here, what we've got is we've got a map of Michigan again, and we're looking at states. Now, this is where the facilities are located. So, if we look at, we'll say 2020, for instance, it'll narrow down and just kind of give us a visual of the volume of transplants completed. But then when we pop it up over here, we'll see a little bit of a change. So you can see how Saginaw just kind of got quite bigger. So let's go back to 3. So we have 16 patients completed, transplants completed in Saginaw in 2020. And then if we look at it, we've got 34.3 completed in, I don't know how you have a point transplant of anything, but that is, it's either transplanted or it's not transplanted in my mind, but it was, nonetheless, the data shows that it was 34.3. There's likely an error rate in there somewhere. So an improvement, but overall flat, essentially. 2022 is better. We could look next year and see if there was an increase in the data and just kind of carry on and trend that out into years. And just for your knowledge, the data is always going to be 2 years behind. There's always a lag with that. Okay, so in this graph, what we've got here is we're looking at total deaths. And this is the last one I've got to show you. So we wanted to ask, what's the deal with mortality among dialysis patients? And again, we're only looking at Michigan and 2017 through 2022. So here we've got 2017, 2018, 2019 total deaths among dialysis patients. And then we get into 20, 21, 22. You can see the huge increase. There is a direct correlation when you get down here. So trend of number of deaths prior to COVID, it's about 2,600 patients. And then COVID happens and dialysis patients just took a giant hit. And so you've got 6,000, 7,000, 6,000 in the following years because of what looks like COVID, because down we have COVID deaths recorded in 2020. Now, there was no COVID prior to this, so we only have 2020 through present. And again, the data is always 2 years behind, so we'd have to wait till 2025 later on in the year to see what happened in 2023 and if there was a decrease. But overall, you've got 3,500. Our average here is 3,526, 3,526 patients dying in the state of Michigan for COVID-related deaths. Even now, you can have COVID-related deaths. So what we're looking at on this side, though, is various categories of those deaths. So typically a dialysis unit or provider has to record related causes, not just COVID. So cardiac infection, liver withdrawal. Withdrawal is meaning it just you decide you're not going to do this anymore. You're quitting and done living. In the facility will record that related death with diagnosis codes and so forth and so on. Our distribution shows that cardiac is the greatest cause overall, but here, let me just select this. So for 2022, it's highlighting this one down here below just to kind of draw your eyes to it, but then you can see just our numbers. So what we've got is essentially this 17.6% is our measure score, and the count of it is 32 times it showed up in our report, in our data set. So cardiac showed up the most as the reason, but we did have a lot of high infections at 4.4 and so forth and so on. So your distribution overall shows that cardiac is the big cause. So we can point back to home dialysis. Typically with cardiac, when they record it in dialysis patients, it's likely a fluid overload type situation and they stroke out. That would be recorded as a cardiac event. Blood pressure is out of control and they'll stroke out. Those types of things cause that, and those are cardiac related deaths. And unfortunately, when you miss your dialysis treatment because you don't want to go to a dialysis facility to get your treatment 3 times a week, those you could have those problems. You could have a cardiac related death event or just a cardiac related event that puts you in the hospital, and you hope that it doesn't lead to death. So when you do home dialysis, you do it every day and you don't miss your treatment and you pull that fluid out of the body. And that's one of the reasons why there's a big push for that, because we can reduce cardiac related death events, but you also reduce those hospital admissions which is what you see when you see this number here, when you see this distribution here. Down below, we're just looking at, again, our chains, and this is our COVID data. So when I look down here, here, let me select that there. We're going to go to 2021. You can see the change in our bottom chart. Not much. So DaVita pretty much remains the same. Looks like Greenfield has a change. And then our independents have somewhat of a change of COVID. So it looks like from 2020 to 2022, Greenfield figured it out when it came to COVID-related deaths. So that's a good thing. Although, you know, the alternative is perhaps there's something in the data that may be missing. There's always something in the data that might be missing. So um, essentially, so in summary, what we wanted to say, you know, is there an increase in home dialysis in Michigan? We can clearly say yes, there has been, and it's the home hemo overall. It seems to be gaining traction over the other two options. And then, is there an increase in transplants? Yes, but it's still low and flat from, you know, then to now, and COVID had something to do with that. We know that. And then, of course, we understand the causes of death, which we just covered, and of course, COVID had a big impact on the dialysis patient. So, here are some references that you could look up in your own time if you wanted to go to 2023. You could look at the U.S. renal data annual report and look at the financials related to dialysis spend. And then the data set comes from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. And that's all. So thanks so much.